Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth, the study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. Please join our courses. It is 12x debunking mythology course, which is available in all places in the US, all campuses in the US, as well as a yoga certification course, which is available on in the US as well. In India, we are tied up with Indian organization, which is KGF. You can also join over there too. And also the short-lived courses will also come from other yoga peeth as well. You could have understand, some of you know it, you'll understand where I'm saying. And do follow us on Facebook and Twitter and let us know your feedback. I have very, very special guest today, and he has written 11 books. I always kill the count, but and he's a very famous author on TV shows and many TV shows in India. So let us welcome Dr. Ratan Sharda.
Namaskar. Namaskar, Aditya ji.
Namaskar. The Indian foreign policy is at full
Well,
flow right
to
now.
ask something, can I ask you something? How's your Indian trip?
India trip was fabulous, amazing India trip. It was very eventful, and I did like I was trying to whatever I had written in my books, I was trying to prove them with live pictures of those places. So I was able to visit all the places, especially the Ravan's meeting with Marich in Varkala Janardhan Swami temple. That was the highlight of my visit, actually. Thank you for asking. Also, Hastinapur. Most of the Delhi people don't know where is Hastinapur. And it's in such a bad state. And I had written in my book that the Hastinapur area was bigger than today's Delhi, entire Delhi, including NC, like same size as NCR. And
In
that
fact,
I was,
only being now preserved better since last few years. Earlier, they were just like dumps, So now they are being preserved. In fact, Dholavira is going to become major tourist spot. You may be aware where a whole exhibition will be set up about shipping and our own, shipping and other industries of those time exports, etc. In Dholavira itself, which was the oldest known port for international trade and it's very scientifically built. So now things are changing surely.
yeah, Hastinapur is still not done. And I think that was a highlight of my visit. I wanted to point it out that the ASI has not done a good work over there. And a lot of Hastinapur area, including the old palaces of Kauravas and Pandavas, are now occupied. Like a lot of encroachment is there in all those areas, including the ASI boundaries. Also, there is a lot of encroachment. And so, Hastinapur, if you look at the line of Hastinapur, if you make the same latitude is pyramids of Giza, same latitude is the port in Cambodia. So it
Okay.
has it is a very prominent central location. That's why it was chosen as a capital. And from there to the center of Asia is just 1400 miles, not much distance.
Right.
So very important place, and nothing more needs to be done. I think people can do it more. And I always support that private partnership with government is better, because then people can, I mean, we are happy to guide, and Sattology, we can do that. And also others can join in, because a lot of intelligent people are there who are working on the same projects. But without Hastinapur, Indraprasth has no basis, period. Because Indraprasth was designed from Hastinapur, and it was inspired from Hastinapur.
You were
So,
there, you may not know the news now that the Kishkinda, where Hanuman is supposed to have been born, there the local government during earlier regime had taken over the temple. The new government machinery hasn't changed, and they were trying to throw away the sadhu and the pujari was staying there in that particular temple. So we have a little, I would say, disregard for many of the old ancient things that we have. Probably were too many for us to really care about because we have a history everywhere. I used to turn any stone, there will be some history. There is a Banganga in Mumbai, which is supposed to have been, created with the era of Bhagwan Ram. And you will go everywhere, you find something or the other. And that beauty of India, where we have so much of ancient history and archaeology, etc., which has not been really valued in true sense. Aga Khan is able to provide finance to ASI to promote the Mughal places, but same facility is not available to the Hindu places, etc. So I think that will also change slowly, but that has been the scenario so far. So, but we have too much of history around us, and I think we believe that we are living in that in continuum that we don't really understand the importance and significance of those places. So
True.
good that you have there. If you remember Bet Dwarka, it was occupied by encroachers. Bet Dwarka is a very important place for Krishna's history, and that had to be vacated by force now by this government after years of encroachment by others. So we have a lot of issues, but yes, slowly, as I said, beginning from Dholavira, we see a lot of changes.
At least some movement is there, but
Oh
like
yeah,
if you some movement is there which is in a good direction, but more can be done. But I
sure.
always encourage private partnership, which is a better thing, because if you look at Israel and other Abrahamic places, mostly maintained by the private organizations and not by the
Yeah, that's
governments.
given fund which was available to these, these medieval sites. Similar partnerships are required.
Yes, like in most of the countries, especially Vatican and other places, the private businesses fund those places. So private Hindu businessmen, they can fund Sattology, and there is a Varadraj temple in South India near Trichy, and that the deity which is installed by Cholas is under a tin shed, and
Yeah,
we have been trying to do a project where we can build a small temple for him over there. So like these kind of partnerships can help really, and people can
in fact,
join
government
Sattology.
did start a project. You may be aware about 4 years back, government started a project of corporate partnership in maintaining these historical sites. Unfortunately, leftist Marxists tried to stop it by saying that you're selling off family gold. How it is sold off, we don't know, because ultimately everything is going to be there, well maintained by the corporates. But still, a lot of unnecessary halabaloo was made.
No, I would encourage Indian Americans to join us, because Indian Americans, they are very worried about India. They are all connected to Indian culture, and but they have to do something more on the ground. Instead of donating millions of dollars to American universities who actually work against the Hindu culture, they can actually help in preserving places in India and joining the incredible India. My next book is coming, so I have a little bit self promotion here. So Ratanji, you have been observing Indian politics and India as a country for many, many years. You've written many books on
Mhm.
multiple topics. So let me ask you, because we feel that S. Jaishankar has transformed Indian diplomacy under the guidance of Prime Minister Modi. So what is your view? Because, as an Indian American, as an expatriate, like I mean, I'm not even OCI, so I'm purely an American citizen. So the why how this change has happened, and we love the way he puts in as few words as possible the most strongest messages, like for example about the oil pressure on India, or recently India rejecting the oil cap, because in he's the first foreign minister, he says, for the first time we hear it, others may have said it, but he said it very clearly that India comes first. How come this mindset has changed?
See, let us see the background of the leader himself. Mr. Narendra Modi comes from a very strong national viewpoint. He comes from a background of RSS, which is highly patriotic, and the organization which believes in the nationhood of this Bharat. It believes firmly it's a very old civilization which had wonderful history, science, and various other knowledge systems. And this needs to be told to the people, and this also needs to be reasserted. So you find a certain kind of assertion in the Indian foreign policy since Mr. Modi came in 2014. It began with reasserting our right over yoga and Ayurveda, which was tried to be served by people under various pretexts. And he started that movement of regaining what was ours on international platform that began it. Then, if you look slowly, how it was always one-sided relationship with Middle East, where we always were very diffident and thought that if you do this, some Middle East oil producing country will be unhappy. If you do that, somebody else will be unhappy. But Modi ji again took initiative. So we were for the first time, we had people in Middle East as well as with Israel. Very open partnership. There was no problem. There was no clash with any of the countries, because they understand that every country has its own self interest, and friendship with one does not mean animosity with another one. So this was another step in that direction. Then came the Quad. When Chinese were acting very, like goons, this Quad came up. It is not a military platform, no doubt, not a military alliance, but there is strong element of cooperation, which was India was never taken as equal during those times. India has become an equal partner. Its outreach to African countries, which had been rather weak, has become very strong. Its Lucas policy, which was claimed to be Lucas policy but never was very effective, was also shaped. And COVID was the big breakout point for India, if I really may say so. That when the Western world was trying to profiteer out of COVID and out of, if I may so, the virus which came from Wuhan, that particular time of the world when India stood by the poor and the needy people, not only in terms of vaccine, but also in terms of every possible medicine, food grains, and every possible help. Even for taking out people from the war-torn areas, can you imagine that India was able to bring out citizens of America and various Western countries also, and also other countries? This kind of relationship in Ukraine, could any country have stopped the war for 2.5 hours so that Indians could be taken out of Ukraine? It was again India. So this the great care for the well-being of their own people, also well-being of the world. The term Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that world is a family, translated into reality. I think that was a major turning point in terms how India was looked upon by the world. Earlier, we were very diffident. You asked me why. Because earlier we were diffident. We looked at India from the Western worldview. We thought that India was never a country because that is what British told us. That is what leftist historians told us. We believed that we were a useless civilization who had nothing except caste and various other I would say troublesome things that could be put onto India's name, but nothing of the credit was ever given to India. I was reading a book, The Imperishable Seed, in which Professor Kamble, I have just given its review, talks about he's not just trying to reclaim the mathematics of India, but also background on which it was stolen, complete links, complete information, and also how it is a project not just for not giving credit to India, but also long-term historical perspective where they want the civilization to be seen by certain academics as of no use. So this entire 360-degree view of Indian knowledge system has now come out with a very young professor. So there are a lot of some activities happening. So when the environment changes, when things change, everybody in Bharat itself is finding a new optimism, a new urge to know and disseminate our wonderful technology, life, science, and how we were basically people of very strong scientific and temper and very strong manufacturing base. The label on us to be put that they're spiritual, only think of otherworldly goods thrown at us by British was also adopted by the left and Nehruvian people. That has changed. So when that changes, everything changes. When you get that strong sense of nationhood, that strong sense of pride in a positive manner, then every citizen, every person, right from bureaucracy to the ministers, behave in a different, confident manner, asserting their worldview without being diffident, without being churlish about what it is, and being embarrassed about what India was or is. So that is what has changed. I'll just give one anecdote how things have changed. Way back in 50s, Goenka Guruji of Vipassana Center, which is very world famous now, which is now being sold as mindfulness, which is basically Buddha's Vipassana, now being usurped by the Western philosophers, that the mindfulness was spread and across the world by Goenka Guruji. He came from Myanmar and thought that the original country must get credit. So he was told by his guru to come to Bharat and spread the word. Now he met Nehruji during that time, and he told him that the entire Southeast Asia is a very strong base for creating a block of non-Abrahamic civilization, which is the true essence of this entire region. It could become a very strong block of philosophy and thoughts, which can be for good for the world and also good for as a diplomatic tool. Unfortunately, Nehruji's reaction was, "Why are you talking about backward, poor countries of Southeast Asia? Look at West." So this is from where we come, and now today, Jaishankarji has said that we are going not because when I went to Cambodia, I have seen some temples of Angkor Wat complex being upgraded or repaired by the ASI of India. Now they are going to renovate and refurbish temples and various Buddhist sites, not just in Cambodia but also in Laos, in Vietnam, etc. So this is how the world is changing. The soft power of India is visible. Now G20 is just a rotating post. It is not something very great, but how to utilize it? Look at the way Mr. Modi is trying to utilize it, and Mr. Jaishankar is selling the idea. India will have 200 programs across India in the next 1 year. So then the beauty of India, the multicultural beauty of India, its history, its geography, culture will be shown. To from the world over, people will come and see what we have to offer. We have more than Taj Mahal. So when this happens, when people see India's true glory and its diverse unity, that is when they will recognize India. So the way to utilize a particular opportunity that we get is what Mr. Modi and Jaishankar is doing.
I have traveled all over the world, Dr. Sharda. You know that. I keep traveling also. And nowadays, I have a more motive to travel for Ramayana history and proving that Ramayana happened all over the world. The Peru was the last country I covered where the Sugriv Senas actually reached Peru and searched for Sita in entire South America. So that was the first connection of India with Peru. And it's just documented before that also because Ramayana mentions that the Siddha and Charana used to live in Udaigiri. Udaigiri is the name given commonly to Andes mountain. So the geography, our itihas, our history is actually filled with references of global travel of Indians and conquering them militarily. The the There are videos people can check out on this channel, Ramayana Footprints, and they will see the entire proof over there. Now the history of Africa also is connected to India. And even though they may not agree because Vatican is trying hard to prove that they were there before anyone, but their own history says 2500 years back. Their own history says they can't do that more than that. Now, question to you
For
is,
them, 5,000 old, Mr. Aditya, if they say that Earth is just 5,000 years old, how can they claim antiquity which has been proven in India, much older than that?
and 25 million
We
years
were
old
able to tell
skeleton.
the age of the Earth way back. See, our Rishi scientists talked about Earth's age, which is now proven nearly correct, thousands of years back. And we have documented history of at least 10,000 years, even if I don't go beyond that. So church has no claim about the antiquity of the earth and also antiquity of our civilization across the world. Our native civilizations of the Americas or Africas is much more older. Forget just India.
So Mahabharat has a reference where Chin is named in Mahabharat, where Chin used to pay kar or taxes to Hastinapur. Okay. So on
Okay.
that basis, Chin was also a subordinate country to one of the provinces of Hastinapur. Now, so can that information be used by S.J. Shankar, who is talking on Mahabharat a lot nowadays, to claim most of the territories of China, because China itself used to pay taxes to India. So now we have a one history level above what Chinese know, because Chinese use their old maps to say this
See,
is India.
yeah, exactly. If China today, not earlier on, but today, if China says that we want to control the world because of we are supposed to be the middle kingdom of the world and we ruled over vast areas, and on that particular assertion, if they want to uh, dominate various other countries around the region, then India has every right to speak of its own ancient history, where they were also controlling a lot of parts of China. In fact, it is said by a Chinese scholar that for 2,500 years, India dominated China without using weapons by very strength of its culture. If you know the rishis who went from Kerala right up to China to teach them not just martial arts but meditation and religion and spirituality, and that is a recorded fact. So if you go back further and we say, okay, as per our own history, China was under India, then if China is trying to use the leverage its own history as it interprets, and trying to dominate the world, India has every right to assert its own rights over various territories, which India would not. But morally, has every right to claim that it has a strong, cultural and I would say cultural and political domination of those areas and strong influence which nobody can deny. And that is a strength because India never tried to dominate others in the way that China has done. And that is why world should respect India and also the philosophy of India, which is now being adopted. If you even look at, for example, when you talk of India's role, remember Solar Alliance, when people are talking of climate change and all, big talks where you spend more fuel, more energy to say that we are trying to save Mother Earth. At that time, Modi ji created a Solar Alliance within a jiffy, and they had 27 countries signing up for Solar Alliance, and there is a big move. It shows the level of diplomacy that we have played, and Mr. Jaishankar Prasad has played, and that is why we see that on the positive side of India is a philosophy which tells us that we must work together, cooperate together, and G20 theme is also same. So that is how we are going to influence the world, not by force, but by its sheer cultural and moral force, which will see to it that we cooperate, we work together to save Earth, because we have the philosophy. We have the philosophy of only consuming what is required, not unnecessarily the consumer society that has been thrown at us, which has resulted in huge waste of resources where nothing can come out except huge garbage dumps.
See, Mahabharata doesn't mention just cultural, it mentions military. It
Yeah.
doesn't mention cultural, it mentions military expeditions
No,
of.
you may so military, but if you see the diplomatic skills, the ethics of war and ethics of rule, that itself is propounded in Mahabharata in a wonderful manner.
I mean, Mahabharata says about Dandaniti very exact, but like multiple times. Like you cannot have Shasan without Danda, which is not doesn't happen. Same applies to rogue states, like CPC is a rogue owner of the China. So like this, most of these rogue states, if there is not a fear of punishment, then nothing is going to happen. So the fear of punishment was always rooted in Mahabharata and Ramayana also, where Bhagwan Ram, when he punished. So it was a hallmark of Indian trade and commerce, because trade and commerce goes where there is peace. If there is a anarchy, then trade and commerce doesn't go there. So I mean, if you look at the messages of even Narad and Yudhishthir conversation, it's all about Sanya Shakti, which I really like, as Jaishankar pointed out, that India's military power has to be commensurate with diplomacy, because diplomacy is built on military power, not on just philosophy or culture, because philosophy and culture comes later. What is your view on that?
See, if you see Mr. Jaishankar's view, as I talked about rescuing people from all over the world, also Ukraine is a major milestone in terms of India's own stance on world affairs. It refused to be, pressurized by the Western world and by the sanctimonious morality police of the West, who have put Ukraine and the entire world at stake just because they want to see that military empire and military industry complex keeps on running and keeps on profiteering. And that is the reason they have created a war in Ukraine, Russia. And naturally, why should India be part of that? So, this assertion of that time, I would say, for example, you ask me how the change has happened. There are certain statements that our right is to have, a reasonably priced fuel, a right to have our own people safe. This was never told very clearly. We had non-alignment movement way back in 1950s led by Mr. Nehru, but it was a pessimillennialist kind of theory where we ended up being in one block the other. We thought we were non-aligned, but America saw it. We are in the towards tilting towards Russia. So West tilted toward Pakistan. So this kind of half-hearted non-alignment, which came out of weakness, has been reasserted in case of Ukraine with a very positive, assertive message that our right is to not to either be in either camp, but our right is to have a good, peaceful life for our nation. This assertion of our sovereignty in a very strong language and our right to have our resources at our cost that we can bear, and not to be pressurized or bashed around by the Western powers who have created a new war, which is where there is no winner finally. We will lose energy, we will lose resources, we will lose agriculture. We have lost thousands of people's lives for what? Just because you wanted Ukraine to be in your camp? Is that what you wanted to have? And now to keep on sending armaments and creating more and more, destruction, I think Western world is answerable. So this assertion of Mr. Jaishankar on international platform, many people say, no, no, this is not diplomatic language. I'm sorry, because anybody could walk into India and lecture us on what is human rights, what is India right, what India should do and not do, whether in Kashmir or anywhere in the world. Despite our presence as a peacekeeping force in the largest numbers, that time is gone. So if the world can lecture us coming in India and telling us what to do, then naturally we have equal right to look after our interest and speak what is true and what is good for us. So this is the difference of earlier non-alignment and a new alignment, which has got huge support from many other small countries and big countries also.
So, so the question comes in that approval from the West or West's validation, and I think India is clearly moving away from that from the diplomacy point of view. But from the
Yeah.
academic point of view, India is still aligned with the West. If you look at all the TV channels in India, they produce a feed from Associated Press and any of those Western mouthpieces. Majority of them do that. So, do you think that this foreign policy is also going to come in the communication or the information policy also? Because information policy is still not aligned with the Indian diplomatic policy.
Well, Aditya, you will remember that is two-way traffic. If news about India is sent out by the leftist and anarchic forces, and that is multiplied, amplified by the Western media, because that is their only source of information from Bharat. If that is so, then naturally on the other side you have those people supplying information to us. But I think situation is changing, because if you look at the debates even on international affairs, you find a lot of Westerners and also Indians very strongly putting our point of view. It is no more sanctimonious lectures to India or to anybody. And now channels call those people on our channels, and they have to listen to our people also. And our people respond equally well. And slowly, the Indian media is becoming strong enough to have its own presence in the Western world. And anyway, Western world is in a thorough crisis. Let us admit it. Whether Europe or whether America, or whether what America is doing will ultimately paid by the Europe in terms of its decay, or whether the kind of social ideas and wokeism that is creeping into US and Europe will slowly uh, destroy the fabric of the society, from family to husband-wife relation to very existence of society as such, and turn into a chaotic anarchic society. And where will that lead to these countries? So this is a point to ponder for the West. And they are at the threshold of serious issues, not India. India knows its past. India knows where it wants to go in future and what it wants to do for its citizens. Now, question is this decaying Western civilization, whether the leadership will assert itself. Tulsi Gabbard has left Democratic Party. I think another leader left Democratic Party. There is rise of right-wing politics in Europe, while even there is some change, again some leftists are coming, but slowly people are tired of this kind of highly destructive and anarchic kind of ideology that is being spread, and also the kind of war that today Ukraine is fighting. I think the Ukraine-Russia war is going to be a turning point, whichever it goes, because people will realize that the self-interest of dominating the world using its military power, military complex, and trying to run its economy at the cost of other people. See, US has hardly fought any war on its own, grounds. It has always been third party which is being paid for the war, whether it's World War One, World War Two, or today's war. And how long people will not see through this game? So, despite wonderful democratic society, the kind of ideology being spread by the academia and the leftist media that is trying to dominate US like no other earlier times. I think this is happening since last about 9 to 10 years, that US is suddenly in a crisis where the forces which are not truly American in nature and truly American its own kind of culture America has developed over 200-300 years, that is very contra to what is happening. I was reading today that actually the conservatives are winning grounds in areas which were actually democratic. So society is reacting, but somehow leadership is not catching it on. And unless that dilemma is solved by the Western countries, they are in for a very serious trouble in coming years, not India. And that is why they need to look at India, how we are fighting these divisive forces, these anarchic forces, not physically, but by ideological, intellectual fight. Because we have our entire 10,000-year-old history to back up what we are saying, as compared to what others trying to look through us to their own glasses.
Much more older than that, much more older than 10,000 years.
I'm
So
saying what is documented because I don't want to go to areas which can be disputed. I'm saying those which are solidly grounded knowledge, which has been accepted by everybody, including the West, which is based on solid evidence. As more evidence comes out, we'll find more things, no doubt. We are finding libraries in Tibet. We are finding those manuscripts in many Buddhist monasteries, which themselves are thousands of years old. So forget about others. And if you talk of through our own history of Mahabharata, you will find they are quoting people much earlier than them.
absolutely.
So, but I will not get to hearsay or where it is not true. I am going with very solid evidence, which is there, which nobody can refute. And that is why I'm saying, even on those grounds, what we have to offer to the world if realizes sooner than later, and if Ukraine and Russia are actually to see the reason that there is no sense in this war, and only people are paying price are poor forces, poor people, and poor citizens, and not really anybody is gaining except military industrial complex.
So one of the things which comes in, that Europe has always been at the gaining end as well as receiving end, and that's why Europe created South America as their go-to place, and most of the European countries enjoy visa-less travel, and also those countries are like a concubines of the Europe. And sorry, hard word to use, I apologize, but that's exactly it is, because I've been to many of those countries and they still take approval from their European masters for everything, for everything. So the next question
If you
comes in the
look
play.
at what even J. Sai Deepak says, who has written the book on coloniality, that coloniality could not be actually deconstructed in the Latin American countries and many of the places because people themselves had converted to Christianity. So their identity was anyway lost. Fortunately, we still have our identity. And this way of looking at the conquered earlier colonial mindset is very sad. I think colonialism has died, but colonial mindset has not changed. So the races who had conquered the other worlds are still in a mindset where they can exploit those countries. Africa has not been at peace. Why? Because those people who had colonized them had cut them into so many pieces that today they're fighting each other. Very logical, just like Red Cliff line of India, Pakistan. Similarly, in Africa, you see the countries divided like that. Look in Arab world how the countries have been divided straight away as though by some knife or geometrical instruments. That's not the way the cultures are. The local tribes or local countries were in Middle East or in Africa. So this long-term damage that these people have done, like in India, in case of partition of India, those partitions of various countries, they are bleeding, and these people are still enjoying that mindset where they think they can control, they can dictate them terms. I think slowly these countries will rebel. They are slowly rebelling, in fact. And it is better that those politicians understand this, who are actually ruling those countries. And that is when the tide will turn. Because most of the resources are in the southern part of the hemisphere, while exploitation is in the northern part of the hemisphere. This understanding, when it comes to which has gone to the people, and they are now getting, I think, very impatient. It is high time that local rulers understand this and try to create the new kind of relationship that India is spearheading today with the Western world. Other countries could benefit from what India is doing today with the world in a very positive manner by asserting its own nationality, asserting its own place in the global order. Similarly, these countries which are controlling natural resources but are being still exploited need to stand up and say enough is enough. Arab world, for all its deficiencies, nationalized oil, and once they did, they had power. They misused the power. That's a different issue. And America did not allow them to use that power by trying to create a destructive atmosphere, killing, I mean, destroying many countries in that quest for energy. Is something that we know how Libya was destroyed because it wanted to stand up against the colonialism of US and other countries. But still, that is the only way out. And China actually got benefit from this because they realized this kind of resentment in the African countries and was able to put a foot there. And America has been none wiser for that. Today, China is getting into Saudi Arabia. But is America any wiser on that? We do not know.
I think looking up to America and Europe for anything now, it's not times have changed now. So we can't look up to them for anything. But at the same time, America is the country which supported India's independence in 1947 from the British. And they were the first country to recognize India. So that's the credit goes to USA because they were also fighting with the British for their own land. Now talking about the European settlers were fighting with the British
And
also.
like I said, actually, this issue, this kind of deterioration has happened more in last 10 years, 8 to 10 years, than earlier on. Of course, there are Democrat versus Republican. We always had a positive outfall of relations when Republicans are there. Always we had negative, though we had much more friendlier Indian feeling towards Democratic Party. But actually, Republican were much more useful to India if you look at the global politics. This last 8 to 10 years have been kind of where people, as I said, who have no cultural mooring of what America was and is, are trying to overtake US itself. And that is where you will find deterioration in the relation and how the global world is going on. This entire, I go back to Ukraine again and again because when the world was coming out of this horror of COVID, this war was started. For what? Just for influence. Are we living in the old colonial times? Can we not come out of it? That is a question we should ask.
See, the wars have never ended in the world. There is not a time like 3,000 years after the Mahabharat war, there was no war. But after that, there is not a single day where wars have stopped. So just to hope that there will be no war is itself a foolish hope because it's not going to happen. War is always there. And also there
But
is a predominant,
aren't
yeah.
we talking of ideal world for so long? Aren't we? All these various summits that take place where we end up spending more energy and more gas than what we actually achieve out of it. But actually, what are we trying to do through UN or every other organization that is coming up? Various kind of organizations, international fora for what? For saying that, okay, we need to live a peaceful life. If we are going to keep on fighting, then what have we learned in last thousands of, I would say, millions of years? Nothing. We are
I mean,
still in the tribal age.
I
That
mean,
mindset of India or world, or especially Western world or today China, where we feel that we still are in that expansionist mode, still trying to control people around us. It was a tribal life. If after claiming to be a civilized world, we are still living in that particular mindset, then I pity that mindset.
European society is a tribal mindset, is a tribal society. I mean, you have to acknowledge that because,
But America, US was a new civilization. The
but the
entire
philosophy
US,
is still European. Philosophy is still European.
the initial aggression where they killed millions of natives, but finally they tried to become a civilized democratic society to their credit, and they're slowly are recognizing their own folly in killing so many people for no reason of those poor people. That time is gone now.
I
If
mean,
they try to build up a democratic society, though they are supporting all the dictators around the world for their own needs, somehow somebody has to show the mirror, and America should stand up for the kind of constitution made for itself and for the
so,
world.
so there is a contrast in philosophy. Like the one philosophy is the European tribal philosophy is man has a dominion over matter. The Indian philosophy is Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, that everything belongs to Ishwar. Okay. So
And
the
yen
Indian philosophy is a
you don't
yeah.
use what you don't need. That philosophy is the future. Yena taktena bhunjita. What you require is all good. Everything else you hold is a sin.
So
That is the
that's a
philosophy.
exactly like eating with forks and spoon can also mean your hands are dirty. Okay. Eating with hands can also mean that you're following Ayurveda and touching the food with your fingers, looking with your eyes, paying attention. So civilization definition is itself wrong in the European context because Europeans, so when you have the philosophies man has dominion over matter, then you have to just classify what is matter. So they classified earlier women as matter, then they classified land as matter, then they classified brown skinned people are inferior to them. That is a matter for them. So they still justify the colonization that because we were stronger, we ruled it. That's an animal philosophy. That's an animal kind of mindset, animalistic mindset. So the philosophy has not changed. So it is going to create wars. So that's why the in the Mahabharata it is said, dharmic people have to wage wars to bring civilization to these tribal mindsets. So, I mean, S. Shankar has commented on Mahabharata, and I had a chance to see him this time in India. And I asked him this question also. But according to you, like, if we, Mahabharata is very clearly Dandaniti. Dandaniti is there, which is there for these kind of tribal mindsets. Because these tribal mindsets, they exploit the earth's resources, they create environmental pollution, and they also endanger other humans to live peacefully. So, what can be changed, further change, expected to change to make sure that India brings peace to all these lands, including reunification? Because if you look at Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa and their neighboring, this was all one country, which was whimsically divided, which you just pointed out. What can we bring more to the table? Because simply philosophy is not going to work.
See, there is a old saying in Sanskrit that the nag, the snake, is feared only because it has got poison. It may not use the poison, but that is its strength. That is why cobra is respected because of its poison. If it stops showing its poison, it will not survive. Similarly, India needs a strong defense, not security apparatus, not to attack others, but to make other people refrain from attacking it and also attacking other poor countries. So, if there are other weak countries, if that is shown that you cannot attack weak countries anymore, that is what can bring people down to some reasonable level. I think that is the beginning of the assertion that Mr. Jaishankar Prasad, under guidance of Mr. Modi, is doing. And we are seeing the change in people's attitude, the way people react to Bharat, and people respect Bharat for very strong assertion of its self-interest and its own aligned interest without being aggressive with other people. So this is what is required by other countries. This is the kind of strength that India can give to other countries to stand up to bullying of whether it's China or US or of course Europe is no position to bully poor chaps. They are can't bully anybody today. They are under the thrall of US and they are facing the worst kind of winter today because of these people. I think so. They also have to realize that they are not going to be intellectual colony of US imperialism. So this speaking out with strength and having strength enough to counter, for example, what happened in yesterday, in the 2 days back in Arunachal, China got a bloody nose. We say that Galwan, we lost our people and Galwan was a very bad lesson for India. But I think because India retaliated, China has realized that it can no more bully India. It has taken away thousands of square kilometers of land earlier. Today, slowly it is realizing it can no more try to bully India. So this strength is very important. That is the reason we need strong nations. We need military not to wage war, but to stop war.
If you look at the China's position of the military bases all over the world, there is a military presence of China in Africa. There's a military presence of China in South America. There's a military presence of China even in Mexico. Even in Mexico. So now, people are looking for security. People are looking to India. Okay, enough of philosophies, enough. Yes, you supported us. But so far as India has given only verbal and emotional and material support, will Indian armed forces are bigger than all the Middle Eastern countries combined, including Pakistan. They're bigger than that. If you look at the count of the on the ground. So will the next phase, according to you, it is not a reality. I'm just a question as a you are a scholar, so just as a scholar to you, is that will India be in a position to provide material physical security to nations in Africa and other countries who are bullied by the West?
As of today, I doubt it because India is still coming out of that dark phase when its own security apparatus are not strong enough, and slowly in last few years, India is trying to cover up that gap by increasing its own indigenous production and also having a good control over its military apparatus and requirement of the kind of assets it requires. So that is first to be fulfilled. And then only when India becomes much more strong in terms of economy, in terms of its own, its own nation, its own people, only then it will venture out. And nor is India really, in terms of military conquest, interested, nor is interested in fact relaxing its muscles. It has gone for peacekeeping forces. It has given its due to the world, but its own strength will slowly embolden people, and that is when India's role as a self-sustaining military power will be seen, not as somebody going out. India is also creating various centers now in terms of its own, centers of military strategic importance. But I think overall, its very strength has become highly self-dependent on its own military requirements, and in terms of its own budgets, its own equipments, and is has full requirement of armaments and security apparatus, which is still being, I think, covered up for the last 10 years of election before Modi ji came. And once it has much more security in terms of internal peace, in terms of its internal policies and stability, then world will look at its new respect, and that is when India can intervene. As of now, I don't think India is ready to intervene while it's still trying to, come up with its own destiny, which had been denied for so many years because of its own weak governments, own, westward-looking governments, which sought approval from West on every issue, and it was being bullied by the left parties in terms of development issues and environment issues. I think that has changed. So in next few years, we don't know where it will go, but definitely as India becomes strong, the weaker countries of the globe will also become strong in terms of its strength, which will give them a lot of strength in terms of talking back to colonial powers.
So won't that put India in direct conflict with USA? Because America
See
has
how.
always weakened other democracies.
No, but see, we are no more in a unipolar or bipolar world, as we know. They are going to multiple poles. In fact, Russian foreign office minister did say that it has one of the very powerful poles in the multipolar world today. So I don't think in the coming, whichever way Ukraine war goes, none of the countries involved in that particular war are going to come out very strong. If that is so, then the world order will change in a sense. There will be multipolar world, and there is multipolar world. India would be one of the important poles, and that is where India is going. That is where I think India's vision is. And once that becomes, when the domination of a particular country or a particular bloc goes, then the world will be a much more peaceful place.
Thank you, Dr. Sharda, very much for coming on the show today and answering all these questions. Many of the questions were by the students who are live. And so thank you all the people who asked these questions also. And
Oh yes,
thank you very much for coming on the show today. Namaste.
thanks. Thank you for calling me. Thank you. Namaskar.